policy with Cuba, this following anti-government demonstrations on the island. NPR's Franco Ordonez says a working group will look at whether money sent home by Cuban Americans is going directly to family members.
The Biden administration is also directing the State Department to review staffing at the U.S. Embassy in Havana, with plans on increasing the numbers to facilitate diplomatic and civil society engagement. The Cuban government responded to the protest by restricting communications on the island, including limiting access to social media and messaging platforms. A senior administration official said the Biden administration will work with Congress and the private sector to identify ways to make the internet more accessible. It is also exploring additional actions against Cuban officials responsible for human rights violations during the protests. Franco Ordonez, NPR News, Washington.
It's NPR.
The world's richest man has left the planet. 5, 4, command engine start. 2, 1. Ignition. Earlier this morning, Blue Origin, the space flight company founded by billionaire Jeff Bezos, made its first trip into space with passengers on board, including Bezos himself. The jaunt into space went just as planned. Here to tell us more about the flight and its crew is Brendan Byrne. He covers space at NPR member station WMFE in Orlando, Florida. So Brendan, how did the flight go?
Oh, it was a picture-perfect launch. The spacecraft, which is called New Shepard, took off from Blue Origin's facility in West Texas. The rocket headed to the boundary of space, and just as it reached that point, a capsule carrying the crew separated from the rest of the rocket. The passengers on board had about 4 minutes of weightlessness and views of the Earth against the blackness of space, and as you can hear, there was plenty of excitement in the capsule. So as they were looking out the window, the reusable rocket booster landed back near the launch site, and not long after the capsule carrying the crew gently landed in the Texas desert thanks to a set of parachutes. The whole mission from start to finish lasted less than 11 minutes.
That is some serious same-day delivery even for Amazon. All right, so we know Bezos was on this flight. Who else went with him?
So there were 3 other passengers, which included the oldest and youngest person to ever go to space. So there was 82-year-old Wally Funk. She's a pilot and was a member of the Mercury 13 back in the 1960s. That was a program that put female astronaut candidates through the same training and testing as NASA's male astronauts. But Funk and actually none of the women from that program ever got the chance to go to space. Here she is speaking with StoryCorps back in 2017.
I applied to NASA 4 times, and finally they said, Wally, we're sorry, but you don't have an engineering degree. I said, well, I'll get one. So I never let anything stop me.
So now, about a half century later, she finally gets that chance. Then there's also Oliver Damon. He's only 18 years old, which makes him the youngest person to travel into space. Damon wasn't originally supposed to be on this flight. Actually, the spot was reserved for the winner of a $28 million auction. The person who paid for that seat ended up having a scheduling conflict, so Damon got the seat. I know, right? So because of that conflict, Damon got the seat instead, and the 4th and final spot went to the brother of Jeff Bezos, Mark.
All right, so we got Bezos, we got Branson, anyone that's not a billionaire. Will they be having a chance to go to space anytime soon?
Well, probably not. These are the very first flights, and they're very expensive. Eventually, prices will go down, so it only costs a mere few $100,000 to go to space, which means clearly most people will still not get that chance to fly to outer space.
What do you think, Brendan? What's the future of this industry? I mean, is there going to be a market for these kind of flights?
It sure appears that there is. So Blue Origin says it's planning 2 more space tourism flights this year, half a dozen next year, and the company's long-term goal is to fly as often as once every 2 weeks. And Virgin Galactic, that's Richard Branson's space tourism company, says it already has around 600 reservations filled for flights on its spacecraft.
That's Brendan Byrne, a reporter covering space at member station WMFE in Florida, and also host of the podcast, Are We There Yet? Brendan, thanks a lot.
Anytime.
It seems like every month there is a new bill passed by Congress that will cost trillions of dollars. Normally, when the government spends money like this, we start hearing about something pretty scary. Inflation. But this year, the smart money, the Wall Street traders who make their living betting on what inflation is going to do, are not predicting much inflation. Tap your screen to find out why on Planet Money from NPR.
Got a case of the pandemic blues? NPR might have the cure. It's not a vaccine, it's an online app called the Joy Generator. It offers little shots of happiness through words, sights, and sounds, like these loons.
Okay, that is very soothing. How about this sound? That's garlic peeling. And here's a sound from the Joy Generator of paper crinkling.
So why would anyone find these sounds joyful? Well, it might have something to do with ASMR.
ASMR stands for Autonomous Sensory Meridian Response.
That's Craig Richard. He's bringing problems for wildlife researchers. From member station KPBS, Claire Traeger reports that an annual bighorn sheep count was canceled outside of San Diego after a volunteer died.
It was supposed to be the 50th anniversary of a citizen scientist tradition. Every year, for 3 days in early July, volunteers hike into the desert, sit in the shade all day, and count sheep.
I've got the mail. The mail's going down, 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 down the water right now.
That's a video made at last year's count. Volunteers like Callie Mack say their efforts help keep tabs on the peninsular bighorn sheep, which are endangered.
You hike up there and you're all hot and sweaty and you're carrying some gear and you're saying to each other, oh, why do we do this every year? This is just miserable.
Mack has been going to the count for 35 years and says it's worth it.
All of a sudden you start seeing sheep coming down to get a drink or maybe coming into your count site and everything changes. It's like the sun coming up.
But not this year. Right before the scheduled count, a volunteer was out in the 116-degree heat stashing water for sheep counters to use. He died of heat stroke. The State Parks Department decided to cancel the count. Volunteers like Mack were not happy.
Honestly, we felt like we'd been slapped hard in the face by state parks. They might have made some modifications. They could have gathered us all together beforehand and said, look, we don't want this to happen again. Be extra cautious.
The California State Parks Department wouldn't do an interview about the decision, but here's part of a pre-recorded statement spokesman Jorge Moreno sent.
While California State Parks appreciates the citizen science surveys, it should be noted that the data set is only one piece of the overall bighorn sheep recovery plan.
He says the extreme heat makes the count just not worth it. And there are other ways to count sheep, including using helicopters, cameras, and GPS collars. But researchers at Oregon State University say a combination of all methods, including first-hand observation, is best.
And I'm speaking quietly because we're watching a group of bighorn sheep.
Professor Clinton Epps monitors bighorn sheep populations by checking for parasites in their droppings.
Okay, we've been here about 20 minutes, and our collared view did just drop pellets, so we're going to go collect the samples and then move on and try to find a different group of sheep.
He says the same way every year is also important.
That's a long data set. And we don't have many long data sets in this business like that.
And that data set helps researchers like him know whether conservation efforts are working. He says cameras and collars also help, as long as you have someone to review all the footage.
It's expensive and it's hard, and it's one thing to put out cameras, it's another to sit there and review hundreds, maybe thousands of hours worth of videos or thousands of gigabytes worth of photos.
Epps says in-person counting can also spot issues like disease, but that won't be happening this year. The State Parks Department says they'll work on safety plans so the count may return in the future. If it doesn't, volunteer Callie Mack says more will be lost than just a sheep census.
It makes more ordinary citizens aware of why the bighorn needs protection.
At last count, there were less than 800 peninsular bighorn sheep. For NPR News, I'm Claire Traeger in San Diego.
DCC's Nick Roman says Pasadena is posting a new health order. Long Beach, which has its own health department, lined up with LA County right away when it announced last week that face masks indoors for everyone, vaccinated or not, were coming back. But